The boardroom was packed with anxious executives whose whispers were silenced the moment the speakerphone crackled to life. At the far end of the table, the young black driver, still wearing his modest chauffeur's jacket, spoke fluently in rapid Japanese, his voice calm but commanding. Across from him, the high-powered CEO who had once mocked him for being just a driver, sat frozen, her confident smile gone. Investors from Tokyo, seconds away from pulling out of a billion-dollar deal, leaned forward in awe. None of them could have guessed that the man who had quietly opened the car door for her that morning would be the one to save her empire. It had started that morning in Manhattan. The air was thick with humidity, and a black sedan waited in front of the glass and steel headquarters of one of the world's most influential tech firms. Inside, the company's CEO, Isabel Crawford, renowned for her sharp intelligence and sharper tongue, was preparing for a day that would determine the future of her company. Final negotiations with Japanese investors for a potential billion-dollar merger. When she hurried out of the building and saw the new driver assigned to her, she barely offered a glance. He was tall, neatly dressed in a crisp blue shirt, with an unassuming calm about him. His name tag read Elliot. Isabel, already in a rush, barely hid her impatience when he politely opened the car door for her. She had no idea who he was, only that he wasn't her usual chauffeur. In her mind, he was just another hire from the agency. Throughout the ride to the airport, Isabel worked furiously on her laptop while occasionally barking instructions into her headset. When the driver spoke softly, asking if the air conditioning was comfortable, she didn't even respond. At one point, as she ended a call, she caught him humming in a language she didn't recognize. She gave him a faint, dismissive smile, almost amused. "You really think singing foreign songs makes traffic faster?" she thought to herself. For Elliot, the silence was familiar. Years of working in positions where people rarely looked past his skin color had taught him patience. He focused on the road, quietly aware that the meeting they were headed to might need more than just his driving skills. The company had been struggling with international expansion for years, and this merger with the Japanese conglomerate was its final shot. Isabel was confident in her strategy, yet beneath the surface, the team had overlooked one crucial detail. They had underestimated the cultural and linguistic nuances that could shape negotiations. When they landed in Tokyo, the atmosphere shifted. The Japanese executives were polite but reserved, and Isabel's confident American style felt almost abrasive in the quiet conference room overlooking the city skyline. Though she had rehearsed for months, she relied heavily on her translator, who was competent but lacked the subtle understanding of business etiquette in that context. Elliot waited in the hallway outside, tasked with simply driving them from meeting to meeting. No one noticed how he quietly observed the conversations whenever the doors opened, or how he paid attention to the tones and gestures exchanged between the teams. He had seen similar dynamics before. He knew how easily cultural misunderstandings could derail negotiations. As the hours passed, the tension grew. The Japanese delegation began asking questions in a more formal, indirect tone, questions that hinted at deeper concerns about long-term collaboration. The translator's rendering of those questions into English was technically accurate but missed the emotional undertones. Isabel interpreted their concerns as hesitation, and her tone hardened in response. The turning point came late in the afternoon. A senior Japanese board member raised an issue that touched on company values and trust. Isabel's response, delivered in her usual brisk and confident style, unintentionally came across as dismissive. The air in the room shifted. The investors exchanged glances. Some began to pack their folders. The billion-dollar deal was slipping away. Outside, Elliot stood with his hands folded, hearing the change in voices. He had lived on 3 continents, spoke 9 languages fluently, including Japanese, and had witnessed too many moments where cultural missteps became costly. He felt that same knot in his chest now. As he saw the Japanese team preparing to leave, he knew the meeting needed a bridge, someone who could understand both sides. The moment arrived unexpectedly. One of the Japanese executives asked a final, sharply worded question in his native language, his tone respectful yet carrying a note of finality. The translator hesitated, struggled, and rendered it in English so bluntly that it sounded like an ultimatum. Isabel's face tightened. She was about to respond when Elliot, standing by the door with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the stakes, stepped forward. Politely, almost apologetically, he asked in flawless Japanese if he might clarify the intent behind the question. The room fell silent. At first, the executives looked startled. Then, hearing the richness and precision of Elliot's words, they straightened in their seats. He spoke with calm authority, acknowledging the concerns about trust, long-term commitment, and shared values. He then offered an explanation, rooted in his own cross-cultural experience, about how Isabel's directness was a reflection of urgency, not disregard. As he continued, the tension in the room visibly eased. The senior board member nodded slowly, a hint of respect flickering across his otherwise stoic face. Isabel sat still, almost frozen, watching the driver she had barely acknowledged that morning become the person holding the deal together. By the time Elliot finished translating her response, this time framed with cultural sensitivity, the mood had shifted completely. The investors leaned in, asked follow-up questions, and before long, discussions were back on track. When the agreement was finally signed hours later, the conference room buzzed with cautious optimism. The Japanese executives extended their gratitude to Elliot, praising his understanding of their language and culture. Isabel, still seated, looked at him with a mixture of astonishment and humility. The man she had once dismissed as just the driver had saved the company's future. On the flight back, Isabel found herself replaying the day's events. She remembered the dismissive smile she had given him in the car that morning and how he had stood quietly by the door as others overlooked him. The realization unsettled her. Her own unspoken bias had blinded her to the depth of his abilities. For Elliot, it wasn't about recognition. He had grown up navigating spaces where assumptions about race and class often obscured his talents. To him, that moment in Tokyo was simply another reminder that dignity and respect usually come not from titles, but from actions. Back in New York, the story spread quickly through the company. Employees shared it not as a corporate success story, but as a lesson about humility, respect, and the dangers of underestimating someone because of their appearance or background. For Isabel, it marked a turning point in how she led her team, more attentive, more inclusive, more aware. In interviews years later, when asked about that crucial merger, Isabel would smile and say, "The billion-dollar deal wasn't saved by strategy or power. It was saved by understanding. Something I had to learn from someone I once overlooked." The story became a quiet legend within the company, told to new employees as a reminder of what authentic leadership means. It asks a question that lingers. How many times do we miss the extraordinary in others because of the labels we carry in our minds?